While talking more about the Russian invasion of Ukraine, how about bringing Cuba into all of this? No, not the fight to the war, but the country's foreign ministry saying that it has uncovered a human trafficking ring aimed at recruiting Cubans to fight for Russia. Well, Cuba is a close Russian ally, but it says it does not form part of the conflict in Ukraine. There is no word from the foreign ministry about who was behind this operation, but last August, Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered the Russian military to increase its number of soldiers after its combat forces suffered heavy losses in Ukraine. While it is still not clear if the Cuban foreign ministry statement is linked to the reports of Ryazan Gazette, it states that Cuba has a firm and clear historical position against the use of mercenaries. It also says it will act decisively against those who engage in human trafficking with the aim of recruiting Cuban citizens to bear arms in any country. Over in Ukraine, at least 4 civilians have been wounded after a residential area in Donetsk region was hit by shelling. Russian-installed local mayor Alexei Kolesmin said blame the shelling on Ukrainian forces. Reuters video reporting from that scene showed parts of a missile with markings in English next to a damaged building. A local resident, Marina Ambrosenko, told Reuters that it was the first time their neighborhood had been hit, although the adjacent areas had previously and frequently come under fire. She also added that she believed an elderly woman found in the rubble of that attack had not survived her injuries. And to the front line now, to those who are facing the Russian attacks head-on in the Zaporizhia region, the launch of the several mortar bombs are viewed as presents for the Russians. Ukrainian soldiers conceal their positions using branches and leaves to cover a metal frame and take cover. But Kiev says its troops are gradually pushing back Russian forces in the south after 18 months of Russian occupation, but the fighting is heavy 3 months into the counteroffensive. But in their enclave, the living quarters of these soldiers have lighting, Wi-Fi, wooden beds, shelves and furniture. Over in the kitchen, rifles have their place just as another kitchen utensil. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has been visiting soldiers in the front line in Bakhmut in the eastern Donetsk region. Accompanied by the commander of ground forces, Colonel General Alexander Sinsky, Zelenskyy thanked soldiers for their service and presented them with awards. Ukraine said that just yesterday, its troops had regained more territory on the Eastern Front, and they were advancing south in the counteroffensive against Russian forces. The Deputy Minister, Hanna Maliar, said that Kiev's forces had retaken about 3 square meters, and that's about 1.16 square miles of land in the past week around the eastern city of Bakhmut, which was captured by Russian troops in May, and that's after months of heavy fighting. And as for the Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, he has described Ukraine's counteroffensive as completely unsuccessful, but that the situation is still tense. He was addressing members of the Defense Ministry, telling them that Kiev's regime, despite colossal losses, has been trying to conduct its so-called counteroffensive for 3 months now. He also says the Ukrainian forces have not achieved their goals on any front. According to him, the Ukrainian leadership is desperately trying to show its Western overlords some kind of success, but gets further military and economic aid, which will only make the conflict even last longer. Well, let's talk about a new photo appearing to show Russian General Sergei Surovikin, who has not been seen in public since a brief mutiny by the Wagner mercenary group in the month of June this year. That photo has now been published on social media by a well-known Russian media personality. Various media outlets reported that he had fallen out of favor with the Kremlin following the aborted mutiny by the Wagner Group mercenary in June this year. Reports also claim that he was being investigated for possible complicity, but state news agency RIA said last month that he had been removed as head of the Russian Airspace Force, and his deputy, Viktor Avzalov, had assumed the job of a temporary basis. But Surovikin, who gained the nickname General Armageddon during Russia's military intervention in the civil war in Syria, who was briefly in charge of Moscow's military efforts in Ukraine before that role was handed over to him in January to General Valery Gerasimov, who's the chief of general staff. But Surovikin has widely been viewed by Russia's war commentators as a forceful and a capable figure. The late Wagner boss, Yevgeny Prigozhin, who died in a private jet crash last month, was fiercely critical of Russia's defense establishment, but spoke highly of Surovikin, calling him a man who is not afraid of responsibility.